Welcome to Hard Talk. I'm Stephen Sacker. Rodrigo Duterte has been president of the Philippines for 2 years. His war on drugs has cost thousands of lives. His human rights record has attracted international condemnation and prompted charges of authoritarianism. And yet, he has an approval rating unheard of in most democracies. My guest today was, till last month, Chief Justice of the Philippines. Maria Lourdes Sereno was removed from the Supreme Court by her fellow justices. And was that a victory against corruption or a devastating Duterte-inspired blow to democracy? Maria Lourdes Sereno in Manila. Welcome to Hard Talk.
Hello. Hi, Stephen. I'm glad to be with you.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you on the program. I am mindful that just a month or so ago, you were the Chief Justice of the Philippines Supreme Court. Now you are removed from the court, and you are perhaps the most polarizing individual in your country today. Are you relishing being in the political spotlight?
To the contrary, Stephen, there is nothing to really be joyful about my situation. But what is happening right now with respect to my countrymen is that they are finding their voices now. And because my situation highlighted many of the structural problems in my country, especially in the area of justice, people are saying that there should be greater accountability from every public official. And that means a great deal for the fight for democracy in my country, Stephen. So that's the bright spot there.
Well, interesting you put it like that, and I would say that your case has certainly brought the judicial system in the Philippines under very close scrutiny. So let's go back to basics and start at the very beginning. Do you think it is credible to talk about a truly independent judiciary in the Philippines?
I think in the present context, this president came in very strongly, attacking many institutions. The attack on the judiciary was preceded by or simultaneously carried out with attacks on different institutions. You could see that first he laid out the basic premise that during his time as a prosecutor, he was used to planting evidence and sowing intrigue. So I think that resonates very well with what has been happening to some of our supposedly independent institutions. You could see this in the Energy Regulatory Commission, in the Commission on Higher Education, in the Commission on Elections, in the judiciary, and he also attacked the Commission on Human Rights and the Ombudsman. So these relentless attacks basically fit in a pattern of trying to weaken democratic institutions.
You say I've always stayed away from politics. You clearly didn't always stay away from politics. I'm just looking at several public pronouncements you made after Mr. Aquino was replaced by President Duterte. Announcements and public comments which many in the Philippines took as directly critical of President Duterte and his strategy. For example, in his war, his crackdown on drugs criminals, you went out in public with your concern about the way in which lists were being published of judges, senior police people, senior security officials who were suspected of involvement in the drugs trade. Why did you decide, as a judge, to make such public comments?
You know, it's not a political statement at all, Stephen. To the contrary, it just was a very diplomatic reminder that every official is bound to observe the constitutional guarantees of due process. I had a judiciary that I was leading. I must make sure that in the face of a very strong presidency, the Chief Justice will weigh in and say, please, Mr. President, do not treat the judiciary this way. Every judge has the right to due process, and the moment you pronounce their names as suspects in a narco list, you effectively destroy their efficacy as judges. They were forced to go into hiding because of the fear that their lives were in danger. I have a duty to to discharge Stephen. And I did that not only with respect to the drug campaign, but also with respect to an attempt by the House of Representatives to take to task certain of the justices of the Court of Appeals for a decision they rendered. I have a duty to always protect the independence of the judiciary, not political at all.
You say not political at all. That's not the way Mr. Duterte saw it. When you made your comments about these lists, and also you advised officials not to hand themselves in without an official warrant, Duterte said that you were putting him in a corner. And then he got even more angry after you made some public comments about his decision to impose martial law right across Mindanao, because you said, well, in some places martial law is applicable, but in other places I don't think you should be doing it. Again, in the United States, in Western Europe, chief justices of a Supreme Court would not be making these very high-profile public political comments.
In the face of very strong pronouncements where the president himself seems to be leading us towards a system where basically he thought that he could disregard the constitutional guarantees of due process to our judges and even our citizens, I am forced to remind everyone of the Constitution. Remember, Stephen, the fight for our democracy is an ongoing one. It's not as if we have a very stable system. The democracy in my country must be guarded at all times.
Well, talking of democracy, let us not forget Mr. Duterte won a thumping majority at the polls in 2016. You are an appointed judge. He had a mandate, for example, to impose a security crackdown on Mindanao. He also had a very clear mandate to conduct his tough policy on drugs.
Now, just a slight correction, he did not win a majority, he won by a plurality. Now, with respect to whether an unelected judge can weigh in, of course, it is the duty of the constitutionally designated officers to weigh in when their mandate requires that they weigh in. And it's not about politics, it's about doing the right thing. And every Filipino must always be reminded that the Constitution is there precisely to protect the lives and property of the innocent, the poor, especially the helpless amongst us.
Would you also agree that integrity is of the utmost importance for any very senior legal official? I mean, not least, of course, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. And as you, it seems, became more and more of an enemy, as perceived by Duterte, he even used that word, there was great scrutiny put upon your own personal affairs. And it seems, unfortunately, that your personal affairs couldn't stand up to that form of scrutiny and real problems were exposed.
You know, the reason why I am asking, in fact, insisting several times that we proceed to a trial before the Senate Impeachment Court is to prove whether there is any truth to any of the allegations that were hurled against me. Remember, Stephen, last year he already was insinuating that I was doing wrong with certain parts of the fund of the court. The challenge was always the same from my part. Let's go to the Senate Impeachment Court. Let's hear the evidence. As of now, I have been denied my right to due process. During the House Justice Committee hearing, I was denied a right to be represented by a lawyer. And then I was saying, if you are so convinced about your case, go ahead and bring it to the Senate where there is a full-blown trial. But that was aborted. So how can anyone continue to maintain any of the allegations against me? All of these are gossip. All of these are unfounded allegations as of now.
Well, they're not all gossip, are they? And you can maybe help me clarify some of them right now, and I'm sure the people of the Philippines will be extremely interested in your answers. Is it true, or is it not true, that on roughly 17 years out of 20, when you were a senior academic in a senior post at the University of the Philippines, you did not file the mandatory statements on assets, liabilities and net worth? Is it true that you didn't, or did you?
Not true at all, Stephen. In fact, if you are going to read about the dissent, it basically shows, and in fact in the motion for reconsideration, that I had a habit of filing this. Remember, Stephen, in a certain way, and the dissents will show this, these were afterthoughts. These are not grounds for impeachment. Impeachment grounds are always related to the discharge of the high public office that is being questioned. It had nothing to do at all with those. That was part of my past life, and in which I filed the mandatory requirement.
Well,
now,
how come at one point you seem to be saying that yes, you had filed them, but you couldn't find any evidence that you'd filed them? You seem to have lost the paperwork. I mean, that seems very strange.
But no, Stephen, that's not strange at all. In fact, we have several cases in the Supreme Court, and one case particularly stands out, where a sheriff for 18 years was not able to show anything in his record, and then there was a contradictory evidence where the clerk of court said, no, actually he had some of the records, and the court said, no, that the evidence was already enough for us to say that the presumption is in his favor. There was no positive evidence brought forward about his filing.
Okay, well, clearly this is highly detailed, and as you say, this has never been tested in an impeachment trial in the Senate. But what I do want to just ask you before we move off the detail to broader points is this extravagant and lavish lifestyle that the government has accused you of conducting, including the purchase of a special Toyota Land Cruiser because you didn't like the official car that you were provided with because it wasn't grand enough, and your tendency to enjoy business travel and lavish hotels. Are you telling me there's no truth to any of this at all?
No truth.
So you don't have a Toyota Land Cruiser when you were Chief Justice?
Okay, Stephen. No, Stephen. Yeah, Stephen, the rules say that whatever security vehicle the president is entitled to, I am entitled to. It got full court approval, so that's the end of it. Now, with respect to lavish hotels, the only hotel that they could say that was a 5-star hotel was the hotel room that was used for the signing of the ASEAN Accord by 10 Chief Justices. So it was already used as a function room. At night, nobody slept in it, so I slept in it. So that doesn't amount to much, Stephen, and we got it at a very good, huge block discount. And the third, with respect to business travel, of course, business travel, Stephen, is de rigueur for someone who is entitled to the same accommodations, because my position is already considered as one of the 5 highest offices in the country.
Yeah, all right. Well, I'm sure the Filipino people will be glad that you got a special discount on your 5-star hotel. So let's not go into that anymore. But let's get to the nub of the issue. And the nub of the issue is this: that when push came to shove, never mind the impeachment process in the legislature, in the end, your fellow justices on the Supreme Court clearly lost confidence in you, because when the Solicitor General of the Philippines filed the Quo Warranto petition against you, 8, that is a majority of your fellow justices on the Supreme Court, decided that you were disqualified, that you simply were not legitimate in your post as Chief Justice. Now, you talk about the independence of the judiciary. These were your fellow judges who totally lost confidence in you.
Stephen, there is only one way of removing an impeachable official. That is the impeachment court. That's the Senate.
No, please, answer my question. Answer my question. Yeah. My question is this. The truth is, you lost the confidence of your fellow justices. That surely disqualifies you from being an effective Chief Justice of the Philippines.
Now, Stephen, if you are going to go and look at the points I said in the motion for reconsideration, 5 of those justices, among the 8, testified against me. So that's 5 already. So by right, under the Code of Judicial Conduct, they should be inhibiting themselves from this proceeding. Now, 1 said that because of my faith, I cannot sit in office. And So there were only two that I had not asked to be inhibited because of their prior pronouncements that really voted against me. 6 said I cannot be removed except by an impeachment vote, an impeachment conviction in the Senate.
But hang on, Madam Sereno, there's surely a simple point here. Throughout this interview, you have proclaimed the importance of respecting the integrity of judges and the judicial system. Here we have a Supreme Court where a majority of the judges think you are disqualified from office, and then suddenly you declare that that's not legitimate. Surely your problem is that your fellow judges simply lost confidence in your integrity.
You know, that's not true at all. There is one very important scholar, Raul Berger, who said, the reason why you require impeachable officials to go through an impeachment process is that you have to protect the justices even from among themselves in a collegial court.
Time is marching on, so let's get through some quick questions here. What are you going to do if, when the Supreme Court reviews your appeal of their decision to get rid of you, what if they uphold that decision? Will you at that point accept that the decision of the court is final and you'll give up, or will you continue your struggle to keep or at least get back your old job?
You know, these questions that have arisen is much larger than my job. What right now hangs in the balance is our democratic way of life. At the beginning, I was trying to give you the context of how so many institutions of our democracy have been attacked. During my fight, so many people have come to me and said, you have a voice that has spoken about the injustice in our country. Keep on speaking about that. Keep on speaking about the larger issues in our country. Stephen, this issue is not about me, about whether I am popular or not. This is about doing the right thing. There is a constitution, there have been laws that outlines when a Chief Justice can be removed. My point is that they have not been observed. So if I lose, as you say, what am I going to do? No? What am I going to do now? I think the fight for our country's constitutional way of life is much more important than just one position. This fight is much larger. I speak.
If I may say so, you're sounding very much like a politician and a die-hard opponent of Rodrigo Duterte than you're sounding like a Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. I mean, opposition politicians have jumped on your case. I'll just quote a couple of them. Risa Hontiveros, she called it a direct stab at the heart of our Constitution. Another opposition spokesman, Gio Tingson, said, we're now a heartbeat away from the death of our democracy. Aaron Pedrosa called it a fascist raid on the judiciary. Do you align yourself with all of these comments? In other words, are you now looking to become a leader of the opposition yourself?
That's a very difficult question that must be answered only when a correct process has been sufficiently followed. And by this, I see the root of our problems as an inability to empower really the little people. Those who, in their daily struggle, find themselves at the end of the rope. Usually, their relatives get killed for being suspected of having committed a crime. They have no one to run to. And I have been finding that more and more of them are coming to me. So what does this mean for our country? This means that there are so many things, so many problems of justice that have to be articulated. Now, the characterization of my role is something that other people have generously helped themselves do. I'm not about to characterize myself as a politician, as an opposition figure. What I understand is that right now, my present role is that there is a voice that must be heard. People are asking me to speak for them, and I have said yes, whether I am retained as a Chief Justice or whether I am removed as a Chief Justice, that mission for justice must continue.
The most recent surveys of opinion in the Philippines have Rodrigo Duterte with a satisfaction rating of plus 70. Truly extraordinary figures. He must be the most popular politician in all of the democratic or so-called democratic world, as far as I can see. Are you not aware that the vast majority of Filipinos seem to actually support his tough security crackdown on the drugs criminals? They seem to support his efforts to bring peace to Mindanao. They seem to support his economic policies, which have delivered last year almost 7% growth. This is a man who is, in political terms, extraordinarily effective.
So are you saying that the voices who are saying that there is a constitution and the poor must have their voice according to the rule of law, those voices must be stilled simply because there is popularity in the present regime? I think it is a duty on everyone who has the privilege to speak, for the voiceless to so speak. And I take that as a possible role. Now, whether you say that I am sounding like a politician or not, well, I don't put too much weight on that point. But what I know is that there is work that must be done to help our people.
Yeah, I don't, for 1 second, mean to belittle the very serious questions there are about President Duterte's adherence to human rights law and to the basic norms of behavior. I think that it's a very important debate, but I would just say to you that Duterte has been welcomed to the American White House. The Philippines is still regarded as a partner by the European Union, who offer the Philippines economic assistance. You look at the international reputation of the Philippines today, and yes, there are grave concerns about human rights, but still, most countries appear to believe that the Philippines is heading in the right direction. Are you saying that the international community should somehow be isolating Duterte and treating him as a pariah?
No, I'm not saying that at all, Stephen. What I say is that the Filipino people must begin to reclaim some territory in the area of constitutional rights. There must be more room for dissenting voices. And I think, Stephen, the analysis that have been presented about the high level of popularity, I really don't know, because some of our problems seem to be getting in the way of really reaching a consensus in the country. For example, the economic effects of the recent tax reform program, the incursions of China, these are raising alarm bells separately from the number of killings that are happening in my country. So it is possible that there is a confluence of factors that will require more Filipinos to rethink their position.
Your critics say that you're a very calculated political operator, and that if you cannot get back to the Chief Justice's office, you will run for the Senate, and ultimately your ambition is to run for the presidency. Is that true?
No. If that's the question, no. I am not someone who plots and plans all these things. I have never been really someone who has sought a political office, even in the campus. So no, it is far from me to be calculating along that line.
We will end there, but I thank you very much for joining me on Hard Talk. Maria Lourdes Sereno, thank you very much.
Okay, Stephen, welcome.